Yo, what is going on guys? Camps TV here, and today I bring you the TFT patch 10.2 rundown. If you are like me, you've been waiting for this patch for a while, so without further ado, let's get right into it. Greetings to those of you who play Teamfight Tactics. Welcome to patch 10.2. This is the one where the gang buffs all the traits, champions, and items that could use a little love. We've got a couple of nerfs as well, but for the most part, we're aiming to make unused or underpowered things a bit more enticing. We also have a few general system changes aimed to make the games go a little faster. Last but not least, we're raising the RNG floor for the item drops to make games a bit more fair while still maintaining variation from game to game. Let's get into it. They start us off with system changes, with the first change being to game length on PvE rounds going from 30 seconds to 20 seconds. Even though this is where most players usually take their time to scout out other players' comps, I think this is a welcome change to speed up the games. There was definitely a lot of downtime during PvE rounds, so this should shorten the waiting times. Next change we see is that 4 gold drops from small loot boxes and 7 gold drops from medium loot boxes have all been removed from the game, along with removing the worst case scenarios for item drops. Basically, all this means is that they are trying to normalize the RNG in golden items while still keeping the RNG element there. This should result in people being closer in the amount of items and in the amount of gold that they get. I'm never a fan when they lower the economy, but overall I think it's a positive change for the game that everyone will benefit from. Next up on the list is that full items now drop way less. Full items only drop if you are already rolling item components. The RNG ceiling has not changed at all, but you are more likely to get a full item as you approach that ceiling, and you can no longer get 2 full item drops in the same game from PvE round. These were great quality of life changes. There was no worse feeling than seeing a gold drop, running over to it just to see that you got a Giant Slayer full drop for your mage comp. The ceiling is still there, which means you are more likely to get a full drop if you already have a lot of item components, but having that chance reduced and making sure it can only happen once per game is a great change. The last change we see here for item systems is that Force of Nature will now be reduced drastically on Carousel. This is another good change because in 10.1, it was basically guaranteed that a Force of Nature will be on the Carousel, which for those who don't know, allows you to have another unit on the board. It will still be there from time to time, but according to Mortdog, the chances have been reduced by 90% or so, if I recall correctly. Breezing by some of the quality of life changes, minions are now immune to Zephyr, which means no more waiting forever to attack the dragon. There is now a chromatic tier to celebrate rare synergies such as 9 Lights, 9 Infernos, and the new 6 Woodlands. There has been a Little Legend voice update, and the way to choose your Little Legend and Arena skin have been improved, which is a plus because it can be a bit confusing when you first start playing. Onto the items for this patch. A bunch of small changes happening, and to kick it off we have Bramble Vest. Bramble Vest damage goes up to 100 at rank 1, 140 at rank 2, and 200 at rank 3. Honestly, this doesn't change much, as I think the problem with Bramble Vest has to do with the internal cooldown it has, but we will see. Hopefully I'm wrong and we see some 6 Warden comps shine with this. Bloodthirster gets a 10% buff, going from 40% to 50% healing. Gunblade also gets a buff, going from 25% to 33% healing. These are nice changes overall, but quite frankly, as long as Morelos and Red Buff stay relevant in the meta, these items won't be seeing much play in my opinion. Ginsu's Rage Blade gets a buff, going from 4% attack speed to 5% attack speed per stack. I'm not too sure if this changes much, maybe it buffs ranger comps a bit, but late game, the fights end way too fast to benefit from this item. I think this buff is a step in the right direction though, and we will see how it plays out. Iceborne Gauntlet gets a nice buff, maybe even making it viable. The stun duration after you ult goes from 1.5 seconds to 2.5 seconds, and I can see Ezreal comps or Kindred comps abusing this item along with Seraphs for a Permastone comp. Locket gets a 50 HP shield increase when you put it on a 3-star unit, which is nice, but I don't think this was needed as this item was already pretty good as is. Lastly, for item changes, Luden's Echo gets a huge buff, going from 200 splash damage to 250 splash damage when on a 3-star unit. This, along with the Bramble Vest buff, are actually indirect buffs to Predator comps, as 3-star Crystal Skarner along with 3-star Cog can really make use of these items, so I'd be on the lookout for Hyper Roll Preds making a comeback. That's it for the items, now onto the trait changes. First on the list here, we got Assassins getting a nice buff to the 3 Assassin synergy, going from 50% to 65% crit damage. And we get another huge buff to the 6 synergy going from 150% to 225% crit damage. This change is a nice change to the 3 Assassin comps and a much needed change to the 6 Assassins comp, as 6 Assassins were seen as a meme comp and were not really played this set at all. I'm hoping we start seeing some creative comps with Yomu Spat like we seen in set 1 during the Void Assassin meta. Oh god, please don't do this. Next up, we got Blade Masters, and from the looks of it, they are getting absolutely gutted. Blade Masters can no longer store extra attacks, so getting the infinite auto attack chain will be less likely, if not impossible. They also reduced the chance to proc from 40% to 35%. This really hurts the Sivir and Friends comp, which I think was a little excessive of a nerf as they weren't an unbeatable comp, despite being a top tier comp. F in the comments for Sivir and Friends. Desert gets a nice change, having the armor reduction go down at the first rank to 40% and going up to 100% at the second rank. This is a positive change as getting 2 Desert was super easy and you would never see anyone going 4 Desert because of how good 2 Desert was. 4 Desert is also now a hard counter to Wardens, which is the first time in this set that we see a hard counter introduced. Next up on the list, we see 6 Inferno and 9 Inferno getting buffs. 6 Inferno gets a small damage buff, increasing from 140% damage to 150% damage. 9 Inferno sees a bigger increase going from 210% damage to 250% damage. Honestly, I don't know if this changes much with Infernos. I mean, this comp sees some play right now, but it's not very strong in my opinion. 6 Mages gets a decent buff, gaining 20 AP to all mages with guaranteed double cast. This is a great buff as a lot of the reason you don't see 6 Mages often is because of how bad a lot of the mages are. Vlad, Syndra, Talia, and LeBlanc are all units that fall off late game. Veigar is only viable at 3 stars and Brand is very inconsistent compared to the other 4 cost carries. But having this 20 AP buff might make up for playing a lot of these units. I think this is a step in the right direction. Shadows get a buff to their bonus damage duration by 1 second longer, and 6 Shadows sees a damage increase from 150% to 175% damage. Good change overall as we don't see too many Shadow players nowadays, so hopefully this makes them a bit more viable. 6 Warden sees a massive buff, going from 450% armor to 999% armor bonus. This is an insane buff to 6 Wardens and maybe Bramble Vest Ionic stacking will be a thing again. Lastly, Woodland now has a 6 unit synergy which can only be obtained with Woodland Lux. This synergy allows you to copy all Woodlands on board instead of just 1, which means you can technically have up to 18 units on the board if you have the right pieces. This gives the Hyper Roll Woodland comp an out late game, and chance to place first instead of just settling for top 4. This also means that this might be the new Exodia comp as it's incredibly hard to hit Woodland Lux. That's it for the trade changes, now onto the champion balance. Starting off at 1 cost units, Leona gets a change in her damage reduction at 2 stars from 90 to 80 and also sees a nerf to her 3-star ult that goes from 140 to 120. This is a step in the right direction as she is the best 1-cost frontline in the game at the moment, but honestly this changes very little because by the time the 10 damage difference matters, she's already being replaced for better frontline. Onto the 2-cost units. Malzahar gets a buff to his minion HP going from 250 at all ranks to 250 at rank 1, 300 at rank 2, and 400 at rank 3. Decent buff, and I think with this along with the shadow buffs, we will definitely be seeing a lot more Malzahar in future comps. Proceeding onto 3-cost units, Ezreal sees a 50 HP buff and some damage increase to his ult. This is nice, but in my opinion, Ez has just been a worse version of Kindred, who has better tags, anti-healing in their ult, and can be evasive. Another indirect nerf to Sivir and friends here. Karma sees a nerf to her attack speed bonus, which was probably well needed as it was borderline broken. Sion gets a small buff to his starting mana, which allows him to ult faster. Another really good buff for shadows. Sivir gets a nerf to her bounces off of her ult, which goes from 10 bounces at each rank to 5, 7, 9 respectively. Another F in the comments for Sivir and friends, they are really getting gutted this patch. Veigar sees a spell damage increase, but frankly this doesn't matter much as he's only really viable at 3 stars for his execute. Last but not least, for our beloved 4-cost units, we have an Olaf attack speed nerf, going from 0.85 to 0.8. I still think Olaf will be super strong in the meta cause once he ults he becomes a beast. You should 100% still be seeing Zerker comps in your lobbies. Onto 3-star champ adjustments. These are just some slight changes to the ults of 3-star champs. Starting it off, Renekton is getting a damage buff from 400 to 475. Next up is Vlad, who is also getting a damage buff going from 450 to 500. Lastly is everyone's favorite Ranger Ashe, who gets her attack speed nerfed from 250% to 100%, but gets an AD buff going from 0.4 to 0.75. Mortdog's reasoning for this was that you were already reaching the attack speed cap with the Ranger bonus, so the 250% attack speed wasn't actually doing anything. With this change, the speed should still be the same, but the damage output should go way up. Lastly, in patch 10.2 are the bug fixes. All tooltips are now up to date, along with the electric tooltip now properly stating that it does magic damage. Karma's in-game model is no longer 7-6, and the most important bug fix here is Kindred's ability will now correctly crit with Jeweled Gauntlet. This is actually huge, and for those who don't know, Kindred's ult currently does not work with Jeweled Gauntlet. This bug fix makes it so Kindred's best build is now Serops, Jeweled Gauntlet, and IE. This, along with the shadow buff, will be absolutely insane, and I would not be surprised if Kindred ends up being top tier this patch. And that is all for the TFT patch 10.2 rundown. What do you guys think will be the best comp this patch? Make sure to leave your answers in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you leave a like as it really does help out the channel. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave the bell icon on to get notified when a new video comes out. As always, you can catch me over on twitch.tv/campstv_ or click the link in the description below. For all your insider info, tips, and tricks, this is CampsTV signing off. Adios, amigos.